This is Northern Light for Wednesday, June 19th. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. Happy Juneteenth. Communities throughout the North Country are celebrating collective freedom, resilience, and joy today. We'll talk with Bianca Ellis, the organizer of Watertown celebration, who hopes the day will encourage other Black people to share their stories.
There are a lot of perhaps well-meaning folks who would like to speak for us, but it is, no one can tell your story better than you.
Also, while a national memorial for Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans goes through a lengthy planning and fundraising process, veterans are working with state and local governments to build smaller monuments around the country. And Canton author Laura Lavoie is out with a fun new children's book. She's inspired to write the book she loved as a kid.
Overall, I'm just looking for kids to have fun while they're reading and to get people into reading and to have kids be like, I really like that book. Like, that scared me and that felt fun, or that just made me laugh really hard and that felt fun.
A look at Duck Duck Taco Truck, plus a look at the Juneteenth celebrations in the North Country this week. All that's coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us. Support for Northern Light comes from Fort de la Presentación, helping to educate and recreate historical ventures of interest to the St. Lawrence region, fort1749.org. And by St. Lawrence Nurseries in Potsdam, providing the North Country with cold, hardy fruit and nut trees for over 100 years, slngrow.com. This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski. Today is Juneteenth, the holiday that commemorates the freeing of enslaved African Americans and helps to educate Americans on the country's long, painful history of slavery and its effects. It's also a celebration of Black excellence and innovation. Watertown Juneteenth has been going on for more than a decade and was the first Juneteenth event in the North Country. The group held a festival last weekend with speakers and music, but today events continue with the raising of the Pan-African flag outside of Watertown City Hall.
Here we raise the Pan-African flag because it represents people of African descent all over the world. That, again, is here in America and everywhere else. The Pan-African flag is the red, black, and green that was given to us by Marcus Garvey, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, early 1900s, say the 1920s. Marcus Garvey was in New York State. In brief, encouraging people of African descent to be proud of who we are, reminding us of who we are and our origins on the continent of Africa, and of course all human origins.
Bianca Ellis is the organizer of Watertown's Juneteenth celebration, and St. Lawrence Valley reporter Catherine Reeler spoke with her about the importance of celebrating Juneteenth in Watertown.
Watertown is the home of Fort Drum Army installation. In this area, frequently when you see a person of African descent here, it's because either they or their family member or friends were stationed here at Fort Drum in Watertown. And so there's a unique relationship that people of African descent have with Watertown as far as in contemporary times. There's also the history of the Ray Mansion and the Lorraine de Chameau family. The remnants of the Ray Mansion are still on Fort Drum. When you look into the history of the Lorraine de Chameau family, you find out things about the family's wealth, how it ties into, unfortunately, with the what was called the African slave trade. You also know that there were quite a few African people captured in a captive state at the Lorraine Mansion. And so we find ourselves doing this work of putting African people back in the story, because when you hear about the Ray Mansion and the father of the North Country, you do not hear that there would have been hundreds and hundreds of African people here doing the work of building the Ray Mansion, of clearing what areas that we now know as the North Country, and they're just left out of the story.
Do you think that celebrations like this, get to marry those two things and bring more attention to it than maybe people think about normally?
I really hope so, Catherine. It is my hope that Juneteenth celebrations and Black History celebrations are places where we actually give space to telling more of the history, exploring more of the history that we are not encouraged to explore in our country. There's an integral relationship between Africa and America that is deliberately ignored. I think we're going to be better off as a country, when we really lean into that with our history here. So I'm hopeful that Juneteenths are a place where we can really do that work of talking about more of our history, as well as, of course, enjoying the things, the fun things, right, that African people, despite everything, have managed to or have brought with them to the country. Everything that we know as American music, for example, is really it's coming from people who come from Africa. So there are opportunities for us to grow as a country and to heal as a country if we let them be that and let the people of African descent themselves speak for themselves.
What do you hope people walk away with from these celebrations?
I really hope that people walk away with curiosity and enough curiosity to go and read things on their own. To say, wow, I never even thought about that, or I never even heard that. And, what does the Constitution say? What does the Dred Scott decision say? What does the proclamation actually say? Who's actually in it? What does it mean? And was Texas really the last? Oh, gee, no, it wasn't. it wasn't. They continued in the country for a very long time. So I really hope that people are motivated to study on their own, to explore and inquire on their own about history, as well as I want Black people, African American people, people of African descent to be safe, ultimately. And when you're safe, it's because you're respected, because you're valued and appreciated for the various things that you have done or not done. I don't think that most of us, both the people of African descent and others, know really the half, as they say, of that history. So I hope that people walk away curious enough to continue to explore on their own.
Is there anything you're looking forward to the future of with Watertown Juneteenth celebrations?
I'd like to see people of African descent continuing to take stock of, ownership of our own story, to learn about it, to tell it, and to share it with others in our own voices. There are a lot of perhaps well-meaning folks who would like to speak for us, but it is, no one can tell your story better than you. An ally is someone who stands beside you, not in front of you. So ideally, you support people and you as we like to say, create spaces for them. You share your resources with them. You advocate and agitate on their behalf, but you always let them speak in their own voice.
That was Watertown Juneteenth organizer Bianca Ellis speaking with St. Lawrence Valley reporter Catherine Wheeler. The jazz fusion group Sean Seals is also playing live at Watertown's Farmers Market starting at 11 a.m. as part of the Juneteenth celebration. We're actually listening to some of their music right now. Communities throughout the North Country are celebrating freedom, Black culture, Black excellence, and Black joy today. Including in the Thousand Islands, the Minna Anthony Nature Center is hosting Juneteenth activities with music, songs, and artwork that's starting at 10 o'clock this morning at the Minna Anthony Nature Center in Fineview. Some communities are celebrating this Saturday, June 22nd. Potsdam's Juneteenth celebration is at Ives Park this Saturday. Share in a free catered meal from Big Spoon Kitchen. Check out work from visual artist Kumba Ama, music from Trump Tight 315 and K-Twist. That's from 4 until 8 o'clock this Saturday at Ives Park. And also the Colors of Freedom Tour returns this Saturday. It's a tour of historical sites from the North Star Underground Railroad Museum in Ausable Chasm to John Brown Farm in Lake Placid. It starts at 9 o'clock and wraps up with a barbecue and songs of freedom, plus a talk from Amy Godine about her book, The Black Woods, Pursuing Racial Justice on the Adirondack Frontier. That's this Saturday morning. Tickets are $20, which includes the cost of bus fare, $10 on your own. Meet at 9 o'clock Saturday morning at the North Star Underground Railroad Museum in Ausable Chasm. So many ways to celebrate Juneteenth in the North Country. You can find out more at ncpr.org/calendar. Some parts of New York, including here in the North Country, are forecasted to see heat indices above 100 degrees this week. Governor Kathy Hochul is warning New Yorkers to take precautions during the extreme heat wave. The governor has set up cooling stations and deployed the National Guard to portions of upstate. Karen DeWitt reports.
Hochul says 50 National Guard members have been deployed to Syracuse and Albany, where the heat is expected to be the worst on Tuesday. It will be bad later in the week in the downstate area. Many schools are on a half-day schedule, and state highway workers are on limited shifts. Pools and beaches at state parks are open, and Hochul urges New Yorkers who have the Juneteenth holiday off on Wednesday to get in the water or simply stay home in a cool place. New York, for the first time, has advanced maps to show the extent of the heat, but Hochul says you don't need sophisticated equipment to know that it's hot.
We don't need any fancy data to tell us this. It's going to be extremely hot and uncomfortable. In fact, it'll be dangerously hot.
While today's temperatures are expected into the 90s, it's the several nights and days of sustained heat expected that will be the most dangerous. Hochul and State Health Commissioner James McDonald say there's a cumulative effect of the heat so early in the season. They say New Yorkers should watch out for the elderly and vulnerable for signs of heat stroke or exhaustion. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt for the New York Public News Network.
Officials here in the North Country are opening cooling centers around the region so people can take a break from the heat and stay safe. Don Lehman is the spokesman for Warren County.
We know there are people who don't have access to air conditioning, can't afford a window air conditioner, or don't have the resources to get one.
Lehman says at least 7 cooling centers will be open across Warren County. There are places like public libraries, the mall, and a senior center. He says those spots can be accessed on public transportation.
Anyone who might have a transportation issue, they can give us a call and we can see if we can make arrangements to get them somewhere, get them the help they need. You know, we've had our local rescue squads and fire departments who step up in these sort of situations.
Other cooling centers around the North Country will also be open for the heat wave. St. Lawrence County's Public Health Department is opening 8 cooling centers. They are asking that you call and confirm availability at the locations. A list of cooling centers can be found at the State Department of Public Health's website. This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 8:15. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. So glad you could join us. Coming up on the program, we'll sit down with Canton children's author Laura Lavoie about her new book out, Duck Duck Taco Truck. That's in just a couple of minutes here on NCPR, which is supported by the North Country Children's Museum Potsdam with hands-on and minds-on exhibits and programs for children 12 and under and their families. Open Wednesday to Sunday 10 to 5, northcountrychildrensmuseum.org. And by Mountain Orthotic and Prosthetic Services, a full-service practice committed to providing care for patients of all ages with offices in Lake Placid, Plattsburgh, and Malone. Details and referrals at mountainoandkey.com. Music now by Dan Duggan and Peggy Lynn. The federal government has authorized a national memorial to veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But that monument in Washington, D.C. is still years away, and some veterans don't want to wait. They're working with state and local governments to build smaller memorials around the country. Desiree Diorio reports for the American Homefront Project.
In 2021, the last U.S. troops withdrew from Afghanistan, marking the end of a 20-year war that took thousands of American lives. It was around that time that Army veteran David Vieira began batting around ideas for a monument to commemorate America's longest war. He and his friends sketched it on the back of a bar napkin at his local VFW in Connecticut.
We drew a map of Afghanistan, we drew the map of Iraq and chicken scratch, and we drew the towers and our little eagle in front.
On a sunny May afternoon in Danbury, Connecticut, Vieira and his team held a dedication ceremony for the completed monument. It's pretty close to what he imagined. 2 10-foot replicas of New York's World Trade Center to acknowledge the September 11th attacks that galvanized so many of this generation's warfighters. On each side, a granite block in the shape of Afghanistan and another of Iraq, the main theaters in the war. Separate blocks contain the names of the 65 Connecticut service members who died. Seeing it now, Vieira says it brings him solace.
My daughter was little when I deployed to Afghanistan, and to be able to take her to a place to see that, the community recognizing it, to be able to point to the map and show her where I was, that just has a special meaning. And I think that is something that every veteran feels and can connect with.
Vieira says the lack of a national dedicated space for these particular wars hurts.
We all either personally knew somebody or know indirectly someone that we served with in Afghanistan or Iraq that has committed suicide since we've been home. And we just find it unacceptable that they never had a place to see their service recognized in a real permanent way. The community recognizing and showing their appreciation for their service and sacrifice. So that was a big driver behind why we wanted to do it ourselves and get it done as quickly as we possibly could.
Connecticut is not alone in its endeavor. Memorials to honor the veterans of these wars have gone up in communities throughout the country. Plans are underway to construct a national memorial in Washington, D.C., but that process has been bogged down with bureaucratic hurdles and strict federal laws about how, when, and where to build. Michael Rodriguez is the president of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, the group that's been tasked with planning, funding, and eventually building the memorial. The foundation has been on the job since 2015. Rodriguez says there's not even a rough draft yet of what the memorial will look like, but that doesn't mean they haven't been working.
I am thankful it is so damn difficult to get this done, because who knows what would be up there, right, if it was an easy process.
First, the foundation needed Congress to grant an exemption to a law that requires 10 years to pass from the official end of a conflict before a national memorial can be built. Then back to Capitol Hill for another exemption, this time for the location on the reserve in the National Mall.
We waited until we got a location because we want to be sure that whatever this memorial comes out to look like, this functional piece of civic art that's going to adorn our nation's front lawn in perpetuity, we want to make sure it fits and it looks appropriate, and that belongs there.
Now, the design team is preparing renderings, which Rodriguez says should be ready by the end of this year. Then it needs approval from the federal government and National Park Service. All the while, Rodriguez says the foundation has been aggressively fundraising as it grinds through each step of the process.
This is a privately funded project. No taxpayer money can be used. I don't look at that as a negative thing because I get told a lot, why are we doing this? We need to be raising money to fight veteran suicide. We need to. I said, well, where's the we? I'm not getting taxpayer money.
Rodriguez says construction could start as early as 2026 and be completed by 2027. When it's finished, the Global War on Terror Memorial will stand near the Vietnam War Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial. I'm Desiree DiOrio on Long Island.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans. Forest rangers in the North Country rescued lost and injured hikers, helped stranded kayakers, and found 2 deceased people in the woods last week. Emily Russell has the details.
Last Friday, an 82-year-old fisherman was reported missing near the Black River in Boonville. Police, forest rangers, and other search and rescue responded. They used drones, a canine, an airboat, and road patrol to search for the man. His body was found along the trail leading from the Black River back to the road. That same day, rangers also found the body of a, quote, despondent man who had been reported missing in the southern Adirondack town of Arietta. The state police is investigating that person's death. Earlier in the week, a 68-year-old man lost his hiking partner while descending Mount Marcy in the High Peaks. The man called the DEC dispatch for help just before midnight on Wednesday. Nearly 20 forest rangers responded to the search. The man was finally found at 6 p.m. the next day and helped off the trail. The following day, a woman in her 40s injured her ankle hiking Buck Mountain in Washington County. Forest rangers splinted her lower leg and carried her a mile back to the trailhead. That evening, 2 kayakers on Taylor Pond in Clinton County got stranded due to strong winds. Forest rangers picked them up in a boat and took them back to the campground. This week, during the extreme heat in the Adirondack North Country, officials are urging people to be extra cautious outside. The DEC says hikers should bring at least 2 liters of water. For longer hikes, a water filter can be helpful. Pack snacks, take breaks, and since pets have a harder time staying cool, the DEC says it might be best to leave them at home this week. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
Early voting for primary races in the North Country continues this week through Sunday. Voters can write in a candidate whose name does not appear on the ballot, but that person must be a registered member of the party holding the primary. For example, Plattsburgh mayoral candidate Iris Kane launched a write-in campaign for the Democratic nomination last week. The Plattsburgh Press-Republican reports, though, that he's not a registered Democrat. Election officials say that means any write-in ballots cast for him or other non-party members will be voided. There are just 9 contested primary races throughout the North Country. They're in Clinton, Jefferson, Herkimer, Warren, and Essex counties. Primary day is next Tuesday, June 25th. This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:24. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, the puns, fun, and rhymes in a new children's book from Canton author Laura Lavoie. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note coming up at 8:42. But first, a look at the weather forecast. At last check, it was 78 degrees in St. Regis Falls, 79 degrees in Fisher's Landing in the Thousand Islands, 79 degrees in Hudson Falls, And 77 degrees in Wilmington in the Tri-Lakes area, 75 degrees in Saranac Lake right now, 75 degrees in Paul Smith, and 74 in Long Lake. We can expect a chance of storms today, but mostly sunny skies in the forecast with highs in the upper 80s to about 90 degrees. Again, that heat advisory is in effect through tomorrow throughout the entire North Country. 70 degrees overnight tonight with a chance of isolated storms, and a chance of thunderstorms continues tomorrow too, with highs in the mid to upper 80s, climbing into the 90s tomorrow expected. But then by Friday, the heat is expected to break, with temperatures dropping back down into the 70s throughout the weekend. 2 ducks, a nemesis goose, and lots of tacos. That's all part of a new book out from North Country children's author Laura Lavoie. She writes pun-filled picture books and spooky middle-grade novels, including Vampire Vacation and Monster Baker. I caught up with her recently in Canton about her book, Duck, Duck, Taco Truck.
I've been writing ever since I was a little kid. I grew up outside of Plattsburgh, and my house was very isolated, and I didn't have any siblings for a long time. So I was very into books, and with reading books, I started writing my own stuff, and never really figured I'd write for kids until I had my older daughter and started reading children's books again as an adult, and was like, these are the books that made me fall in love with reading, and decided I wanted to try my hand at writing them.
What are some of the ways that you, maybe I should ask, like, where have you come across ideas in the past, and how do you think of that creative process too? It can be different for different people.
Yeah. So for me, I tend to just kind of have ideas pop into my head, and sometimes they're more formed than other times. So sometimes it's more of a partial idea, and then I'm kind of trying to think about, can I develop this? Will this work? So for my book that's coming out, I was watching my kids play in the backyard and kind of had been observing them over the course of the summer doing different things. And it's called Duck, Duck, Taco Truck. And it was kind of a hybrid idea between like the game Duck, Duck, Goose, but also watching my kids run a lemonade stand and kind of trying to have their own business. So it's like these 2 ducks that have this taco truck business, and they're trying to make this money to save up for this boat that they really want, but they have competition, and they have to figure out like how to navigate that and what to do when their sales decline. So it's like, it's kind of kid friendly, but it also sort of came from this bigger hybrid idea that I had.
And you've got a copy of the book with you. Can we take a look at it?
So this is actually also, it's my first rhyming book that I've ever come out with. So that's exciting. Learning to write and rhyme was a whole new thing.
What was that like? I guess I think of kids' books as rhyming, but they certainly don't.
Yeah, so my first 2 books were not rhyming books. And for the most part now, editors are very, like, your rhyme has to be very, very spot on. Like, everything's perfect. Not having any near rhymes, making sure the meter all flows properly. So it's like, it's a lot to think about. But this book, when I thought of it, I just kind of thought, I think that's one that makes sense, like it should rhyme. So I tried to write it that way, and it worked out. But it was definitely a challenge, but in a fun way.
Yes, can you walk us through like what we're seeing here? Yeah. I'm loving, this must be the taco truck with the fajitas and salsa.
Yeah, so basically there's these 2 ducks. They have this taco truck that they set up at the beach, and they're trying to save their money because they want to buy a boat to help them get around so that they're not having to paddle and swim all the time to make their lives a little easier. But then one day this goose that has a competitor food truck comes and parks right next to them. And they're like, what is this goose doing here? And so they decide that they're going to have this kind of battle. So this line says, rival food trucks side by side, battle on, at dawn we ride. So it's like we're going to have this competition of like who can sell more food. But the problem is the ducks are just selling tacos, and the goose has this food truck that just sells all sorts of stuff. So like he's got hot dogs and pizza and everything, and so they really can't compete with him.
And curly fries.
And yeah, curly fries, falafel, like all kinds of stuff. But basically, then he winds up getting really overwhelmed because he has too many customers and he can't handle it. So as the book goes on, they decide to work collaboratively together. The goose kind of calls out and says, didn't mean to ruffle feathers. Maybe we could work together. And they wind up figuring out a plan of how they're going to make this food truck, they're like drawing up ideas of different meals they could make together.
I love this. Shake, squeal. It's a deal.
Yeah.
Let's create the perfect meal.
Yeah. So yeah, it was super fun to write, and then super fun to see like how the illustrator did all these awesome food mashups. So I mean, there's kind of this deeper message about collaboration and teamwork and that sort of thing too. Because I think there's, it's good if parents or teachers can always kind of have something to talk to kids about after you read the story about like, well, what was this about or what was going on here? And so in this case, they figured out a way to compromise on some things and work together. But it's also just a really fun book and lots of nods to like kid favorite foods, mac and cheese, waffles, all the things that, kids tend to like to eat.
Oh, yeah.